Hi everyone, welcome to another detail review. Yeah, sorry about the last one getting lost in the ether, but I hope you enjoyed the anthology that came out that covered all those games anyway. Today, Victorian Masterminds is going to get some detailed looks, courtesy of Zatu Games. In Victorian Masterminds, you are effectively building an engine. Quite literally, actually. You're building your engine of destruction. It's a giant, mechanical creature, like a tarantula or submarine or some big, claw airship thing. Think something like the big giant tarantula from Wild Wild West, you know, that kind of creation. But while you're doing this, you're capturing buildings for victory points, you're kidnapping scientists, you're collecting forbidden knowledge, and to do all this, you are sending out your agents on these cog pieces. And the idea is that you will look at the top of a stack. That will tell you what the agent ability is. Other players do not know this, it's hidden information, and you'll pop it down on a location on the board face down. And that is your turn. That's literally it. Next player will do the same, and it will keep going until at some point there are 3 cogs on a stack. At which point you flip the whole lot over, so if you were there first, you go first, and they resolve one by one. The player whose colour it is gets to collect a spoil reward as well as do the ability on the cog. And, you know, as it goes down, different abilities will affect other players, or they'll let you do things like capture the buildings, claim objective cards, claim more of the spoils. You know, it varies like that. But that's essentially the gist. You put the cogs down, they resolve over time, you slowly build up this engine in front of you, you level up on this firepower track just to basically capture buildings. It's kind of like you have to be more powerful than the Secret Service in order to do it. And you try and claim objectives. At the end of the day, you are basically building up a literal engine for victory points. And that's kind of the gist. Pretty simple, but what's it like to actually play, and will it stand the test of time? Let's go into some more detail. For the duration, yeah, this is another one of those occasions where the game lies to you. It says 45 to 60 minutes on the box. Now, for 2 players, that's true. 3 players, maybe. 4 players, not a hope in hell. It's basically, this thing seems to assume that between 2 and 4 players, it's 5 minutes extra per player. Well, 7.5 minutes extra per player. No, it doesn't work like that. And you're thinking, well, maybe the game scales in order to make it longer and shorter. Not really. Literally, you have a track that it tells you how powerful the Secret Service is and how good your firepower is against them. Basically, to scale it with player count, you just lift the needle 1 extra notch. That's literally it. Nothing else in the game scales by player. So at the end of the day, when you're having to select, you know, like your agent discs in order to say, right, okay, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here, we'll do this, right, resolve this. The more players you have, the longer it's going to take, and that's like longer than 7.5 minutes each. I'm telling you that now. You know, you could be easily going 90 minutes for your first game, certainly for a 4-player game in general, and that's where it gets a little bit long. This game is not we'll get onto it in a minute, but it's not the most, brain-burning game ever. So for something like this, it kind of needs to stay at 60 minutes. And if it goes on much longer, I found in my games that it was just dragging that little bit too far. It gives me the impression that maybe this is better as a 2 and 3 player game. You know, certainly from the plays I've had, 2 players has been pretty good, 3 players has been, again, the sweet spot, broken record, and 4 players is just dragged out a bit. It's just got too long. You know, you're constantly resolving those stacks of agents, you know, in order to do your thing. So in 4 players, that's happening on a frequent basis, which means the game is stopping in order to actually resolve them. It's a hit and miss affair, but 45 to 60 is only semi-accurate. You know, 4 players, I think, just outstays its welcome far too long. 2 and 3 players is where you get that nice sort of sweet spot of about 45 to 60 minutes. Maybe for your first game of teaching, 75 minutes tops. But if it starts going on any longer than that, then it's kind of outstayed its welcome. Ease of play is a 50-50 affair. On the positive side, it is generally quite an easy game. There's not a lot to it. Your turn is literally take one of your discs off the top of your stack and stick it on a location. That's it. There's nothing else you need to know. Obviously, the decision making with that agent is a different story. You know, you've got the agent, you know what type it is, you're going to think, I can get 2 rewards for this, 2 spoil rewards, so maybe I'll stick it over there, get myself 2 scientists, or maybe it's better over there. But then you might have picked up the saboteur, and then suddenly it's like, hang on, well, I don't want to put it last in the line, because that's kind of pointless. I want to put it first or second in a stack, so let's put it on top of yours there. And you know, those sort of decisions aren't that taxing to do. It's usually fairly self-explanatory where you should send your agents to. But in terms of rule set, there's not a lot. The rulebook itself is fairly small, there's a fair amount of pictures to show you examples, but there's not a lot to learn. You've got 5 different agents, you've got the different, 4 different things you can pick up, points, 2 separate types of part tokens, and the, what's the other one? Oh yeah, and the scientists. And that's about it. After that, you just need to know how to resolve a stack, and once you know that, you're pretty much on the way to just doing your first game. It really is quite a simple affair. Now, the game does like to throw a few spanners in the works, literally, while you're trying to build this engine of yours, in order to hinder that. Because firstly, the rulebook it's alright, but it does miss out some key details. Firstly, there is no reference aid for you. Why not? Why is there no reference aid for the players? It's on the back of the rulebook, but nobody likes passing a rulebook around all the different players. There's no individual one. Secondly, there is no glossary or reference for the player abilities or the objective cards. None of them. The game just assumes that you're going to know them off by heart, or you're going to easily figure them out from the cards. And granted, for the most part, you can figure them out from the cards. But that's still no excuse. If you're going to design a game, you put a rulebook in that explains everything, even the kitchen sink, to someone who's literally a chimpanzee. You cannot just take liberties like that. And, in the case of player abilities, there's actually 1 or 2 of them that aren't very clear at all. The claws one, which I think has you put an agent underneath lets you put an agent from your face down stack underneath an agent on another location. Right? That in itself is not difficult. Read the wording on the actual card that tells you that ability, and my goodness, it is badly written. So much so that the first thing I googled was claws, claws player ability. First thing that came up, BGG Fred claws ability. This is already an FAQ for this particular ability because it's worded so poorly. Come on, guys. You've got a game that's fairly simple here. Don't start, convoluting certain elements, or don't start, cutting corners, to let people in. And like I say, those little gripes aside, generally it is a very easy game to play. In a sense, well, we'll get onto a slight down point with that a bit later on. T for tactics and strategy. Now, there's not exactly a huge amount of strategy in this game. I mean, at the end of the day, you're kind of having to react to what agents you pick up out of your stack. You can level up a certain track in order to say, right, I can actually choose any of them I want, but even so, you don't really have a long-term strategy. You're kind of having to react to what's going on. You could say at the start, well, I'm going to get all the firepower and just capture a bunch of buildings. That's all well and good, but you can't do that forever, and only one of your agents allows you to do that. So you kind of have to think of other ways to get points. Now, granted, you'll miss out 1 or 2 elements, but you're going to have to focus on other things bar just one aspect of the game. Tactics-wise, though, there is a fair amount of it, but there's nothing particularly brain-burny here. It's not difficult to decide, oh, I should build this, or maybe I should get that. It's not like you can't tell which one gives you more points than the other, it's just a case of which one do you want. Do you want to have in your codex books more points at the end of the game? Do you want to have more firepower? Or, well, build this then. Do you want more scientists? Well, then I better build the cells then. It's pretty easy to tell what you need to do when you think of it. If anything, the tactics is more in the placing of the agents in the stacks. Because, yes, okay, most of the time you're only going to be able to see one of them at a time. But where you place it does make a difference, particularly with what the other players are doing. A location that is devoid of cogs is unlikely to resolve itself anytime soon, whereas you could put it on the final third one on the stack, and then it resolves. So it's like, I'm going to be giving those 2 players something, but then I could do with something right now, so maybe it's worth me doing that. Better still, you could just put it as the second in line for something, and you think, right, well, I'll put it as the second cog in that stack. Somebody else is going to trigger it. I'll sit back and wait. Before it gets back round to me, somebody's going to trigger it. So there's a decent amount of tactics involved, but it's pretty much just to do with the cog placement. And you still have to accept that there's still a high amount of luck in the game. Objectives, when somebody claims them, may simply just get replaced with something that you either cannot do, or something that you just conveniently can do, in which case, all happy days. But then on top of that, you have the luck of drawing the cog from the stack. Yes, you can level up a track that allows you to cherry pick which one you like, but let's say you don't go down that route. Let's say you don't get those until later on in the game. For most of the game then, you will therefore be just top decking your stack of cogs. And that can hinder you quite badly, because you're thinking, oh, this would be a perfect time for a ×2. No, it's the saboteur. Alright, fine, I'll put that out. Oh, I could really do my engineer right now. Oh, it's the henchman. And it can hurt you in that instance. So people are probably saying, well, why don't you level to that immediately? Well, yeah, that's all well and good, but you've still got to spend time doing that, and you're probably better off spending your points elsewhere. So it's not that this game is completely luck-based or anything like that, but you've got to bear in mind that for something as fairly simple as this, sometimes the luck of the draw is going to get in the way. Aesthetics, 90% of the time, this is pretty solid. Although a bit overproduced. This is a game that is supposed to take an hour. It's not meant to be a complex game. And yet the price point is really high for this game. Too high in my opinion, because of the aesthetical quality here. It does look great. I mean, it's got a flashy cover. You've got miniatures for all the buildings and monuments, which are completely pointless because at the end of the day you could have just used a token or a standee and that would have done the same job, because all the building literally does is sit on a location board until you get it and then it just stays in front of you. That's it. It doesn't go on a map or anything. So granted, this is cool mini or not, they're going to make miniatures for whatever they can. Literally I think the kitchen sink in here is a miniature, but it's kind of unnecessary. But the other side, it does look nice. The miniatures are great. The artwork is really good. It's vibrant and colourful. I like the player boards where you can see your machine and you put tiles on it when you build the various parts, so you see it all come together. You've even got little scientists like head molds for those little dudes. However, it's not all beautiful in that, because the part tokens, oh my god. You've got this Big Ben monument that's about this big. It's pretty big, it's pretty sizable, and it looks great in front of you. Contrast that with the part tokens, the copper plates and the bolts. They're like, big. Like, I don't think I can get my fingers small enough for them. They are stupidly tiny. And you're supposed to get these on a regular basis and put them on your player mat in order to build the engine of death. That's what I'm going to call it now, your engine of death. But they're so small, they are so fiddly, and they just look naff. How can you have this glorious quality here of artwork and miniatures and then just cut a corner here with these wretched little part tokens? They could have used anything. I might have even preferred cubes. I mean, thank you, Cool Mini or Not. You actually made me say I would prefer cubes over a tiny little token. That doesn't happen. That seriously should not happen. But, like I say, it's a small gripe, but yeah, it kind of contrasts with that. On top of this, the insert, seriously, Cool Mini or Not, you have got to work on your inserts. The insert for this is great for holding the miniatures. It sucks for every other aspect. There is nowhere to put the cards. Nowhere. There's no slot for the cards. So where do they go? There's no slot for the cogs. So where do they go? There is a cubby hold that's only barely big enough to hold the tiles for the machine parts, but even then, unless you are flat packing it in Tetris style, it's going to splay up, it's going to look like a Toblerone bar at the end, like a junk heap, and again, that's going to cause issues with closing the box. So you're torn between ditching the insert so that you can just put everything in without any problems, and losing the bit that actually holds the miniatures well. But then if you keep the insert in there for the miniatures, you've then got to do this rubbish sort of origami thing with the rest of the insert, and then at the end of the day, you're going to have to lay some stuff out on top, like a few cogs and that, because it will not fit properly. How the design department let that through, I don't know. Somebody must have looked at this game, must have looked at the final production copy, looked at that insert, and gone, yes, get that out the door. But what was that person thinking when they thought that that half of the insert was decent or was good enough? Fail. Super fail. So, like I say, 90% of the aesthetics are pretty cool. You're just going to have to put up some very tiny little part tokens and an insert that you probably might as well just chuck away. But other than that, aesthetically, it's pretty good. The integration of theme. Now, you're not going to get a great deal of theme with this one. It's not that the theme works against it or anything. You are building this machine of destruction, machine of death, whatever, and you are capturing buildings. But at the end of the day, capturing buildings is basically, is your firepower rating more than the Secret Service? Yes. All right, take this building, it's worth 2 points. Okay, that seemed a little bit anticlimactic. the parts that you're building for the machine thing, they're varied among the different players, so there's subtle differences between what bonuses they give you and how much they cost, but at the end of the day, you're basically just building this thing together, and at the end of the day, you'll piece it all together and that will be the end game trigger. So it's not like you actually get to send that machine out and do cool stuff, it's just there. As for the agents, it's cool that they appear on these little cog pieces, but again, the agent is basically what ability does it have, so it's not that the theme is non-existent, but it certainly isn't super strong. So you're playing this mainly from a mechanical standpoint. And if the idea of that little element of bluffing with the cogs and just the tactical decisions of where should I send this particular agent, which bits of my machine should I build, and everything like that, if that's appealing to you, then the theme's not going to matter too much. But certainly the theme is not super strong. But then I wasn't expecting it to be that super strong for something that was claiming to be a 60-minute Euro. The shorter the game gets, the harder it is to integrate theme, in my opinion. So with this, it's mostly just flashy aesthetics as to how powerful the theme is. For most of you, that doesn't matter. For me, it was a little bit of a downer, but I kind of expected this to be mostly a mechanical game. The longevity is where this one is hurt a bit, because the game is fairly short. You will play it, and you will play it fairly quickly. The high price point is going to deter a few people from actually buying it in the first place, because this falls into the same problem as Counselor 4, which again was another Cool Mini or Not collaboration, where it's ridiculously overproduced and it doesn't justify how much you're doing in the game. But that's kind of Cool Mini or Not shtick. They charge a premium, you get wicked little miniatures, but you have to hope that you're going to play the game often enough to justify that price point. With the longevity in this, though, there are some issues, and this is where a couple of those little design choices they've made start appearing on the surface, and you go, huh? Why? For starters, the 5 locations that you go to, big London, Washington DC, whatever, they are literally identical other than the spoil reward it gives you. That's it. They all have 4 buildings, 1 in each of the slots for a spoil. 1 is a monument, 3 of them are just generic buildings. It is no more difficult to capture a monument than it is a generic building. So considering some of the objective cards are based on having a specific monument, and the monument gets you extra victory points, why would you not take a monument? It's kind of self-explanatory. So you should have at least made it a little bit harder. So all the buildings are basically generic. The 5 locations, again, are pretty generic, so there's no difference between them. You've got the 5 agents, but that's it. You don't sort of get to buy more agents or different ability agents. I mean, that would have been pretty cool, that you could hire additional agents with different abilities. I would have liked that, actually. Maybe in an expansion you could do that. But on top of that, the objectives aren't overly that interesting. It's mainly, do you have this building? Right, you can get 3 points. Do you have that building? Well, you can get 2 points there. Do you have 5 of these copper plates on your machine thing? Which isn't explained in the rules. You have to guess that. Fine, we'll take 4 points. It's going to lack in some of those aspects. And you just feel like maybe they could have just varied things up a bit. Maybe included a variant or 2 just to spice things up. But no, it's fairly similar every game you'll play. And even the player scaling is basically just that needle is here at 2 players, 3 players, 4 players. That's it. Nothing else changes. So with a 4-player game, the stacks are going to resolve constantly. In a 2-player game, it's going to be a little bit more... It's going to take longer before a stack resolves. Again, it plays fine with 2, 3, or 4 players, although I would say that 4 is still a bit of a drag. This is really for 2 and 3 players, in my opinion. But I feel that this one is going to be one of those games where you'll go, oh, that was nice, that was okay. And you may repeat that for a few times. I don't think it's going to stand the test of time, though, and I feel that in the long run, Victorian Masterminds is going to be forgotten. I will eat my phone if this game is talked about at the end of the year. At the end of this year, if this game is still being talked about, I will eat my phone, because I don't think it's going to stand the test of time. It's not that this is a bad game, but there's just not enough in it that I think is going to make people come back to it over and over and over again, other than the fact that it costs a fortune to buy in the first place. So longevity is not as great as I would like. So overall, I can only really give Masterminds about a 6. A 6 is about as high as I'll give it. I think the game is still fine, but just this idea that it's put in such a glossy package that it doesn't need to be in a glossy package is hindering it, because I think it's too expensive for what it offers. I think that despite some really good aesthetics, there's just some aspects to it where I just think, who designed that and why? And the longevity is hurt to an extent where I just think that by the end of the year, nobody will talk about this game. You know, if somebody does talk about it at the end of the year, I will eat my phone. That's how confident I am that I just think this is going to get forgotten. So that's it from me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review, and regardless of whether Big Ben is now under my control and I'm soon to take over the world, it's still only a game, so I promise to return it soon in its mint condition. See you next time. Take care.